Welcome to the Preserving Family Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to equip you to gain insight, information, and inspiration to help you protect, teach, and guide your family during these turbulent times. Our goal is to provide tools and resources to help you strengthen and preserve your own marriages and families. Now here are your hosts, Dr. Mark and Janie Ogletree.
Well, I am excited to be here today with a good friend and colleague, Travis Parry. Travis is an international speaker, coach, and the founder of the Make Time Institute. He's the #1 best-selling author of Achieving Balance and Marry and Grow Rich. He's earned a master's in psychology and a PhD in family relations to better understand finances from a psychological and marital perspective. Travis is the founder of the Make Time Institute and has helped thousands of business owners and couples in all 50 states to achieve their financial goals. He's an international speaker and the podcast host of the Balanced Growth Show. However, his greatest accomplishment in life is becoming the husband to his beautiful and talented wife, Angela.
That's right.
And been married for what, Travis? You said 21 years?
21 years.
And then, like us, you have eight wonderful children.
8 kiddos. Yep.
What's your ratio, by the way?
So we have, we didn't ended up balanced, ironically. We've got 5 girls and 3 boys.
Okay.
So,
but you're a lot more balanced than us with 1 son and 7 daughters. You
yeah,
figured something out.
Yeah. I don't know if we figured anything out. No, it's like we knew everything at first, and now we know nothing. But it's fun. We have 2 of those kiddos on missions. We have one in Australia. She's coming home in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And we have another, our son, who's in Peru right now in Cusco.
Yeah. Awesome.
So it's really exciting as parents to see your kids go out into the world. So, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And I know we've talked about this briefly, but if you and your wife ever think you should stop doing what you're doing with this podcast, I want you to remember this specific interview. Don't.
Okay. I'm gonna
keep going, persevering. That's the name of your
preserving the family.
Preserving the family. But that's what you guys really have done an incredible job with, and you have this that we share in common is BYU and the gospel of Jesus Christ, that you can really utilize the principles of the gospel to share this with families is wonderful. So keep doing it.
Yeah, Travis, no, thank you so much. And you know a little bit about the podcast grind. Did you have a podcast yourself? And it's one of those things that about every few months you're like, gosh, can we keep doing this? And then, like I told you, you get an email from someone saying, oh boy, this has had an impact on us. Don't stop. So thank you for your support and encouragement. All right. So Travis, you and I know each other, and we've talked over the years and kept connected professionally and in other ways. And I've come to know some things about you besides that you're in incredible physical shape.
Oh, thanks.
One of the things I learned is that you had an experience years ago that really kind of changed the trajectory in your life. It was when your dad passed away, and he was pretty young, right, when he died. And this is a show, where we're talking about families a lot and issues that families deal with. And so I thought it would just be pretty cool if you just kind of shared with us some of your experiences with that and takeaways from that. Just before we kind of launch into the actual topic, it'd be fun to kind of learn about that a little bit from you.
I appreciate you asking. It's interesting because I wrote Achieving Balance, and the last thing I did is I wrote the intro to the book.
Yeah.
I was done, and I told a little bit of the story of my dad. My dad and I actually really close. He served in Denmark on his mission.
Okay.
Back in the late 70s. And his mother, my grandma, was from a little town in Denmark called Randers. And I went to visit there when I was a kid. He brought me and my sister, and I had such a connection with Denmark. And I just thought, wouldn't that be cool if I could go there on my mission?
Yeah.
So I studied Danish and I studied German in high school, just, because that was the closest thing. They don't teach Danish in high school.
Yeah.
And my dad and I formed a really cool, tight bond around Denmark and mountain biking.
Yeah.
That's what keeps me in any shape.
Right.
Is mountain biking. And my dad and I would go mountain biking all the time. We got my brothers into it. It was a family sport.
Yeah.
We'd take mountain bike trips and things. And, I was married. We had 2 kids. The youngest was, I think, only like 6 or 7 months. Now he's the one on the mission.
On a mission, yeah.
And my dad, unbeknownst to us, apparently had, on some bike rides, had some breathing problems.
Okay.
And Mom never shared this with us until after. I don't think she really saw it as a sign, but he may have suffered a heart attack before.
Yeah.
But on a bike ride, just a normal day with his friends who happened to be an EMT, one of his best friends, and his brother was going to meet him on a separate spot. He was just kind of doing his thing, and he was in very good shape. He incredibly strong.
Right.
I always struggled to keep up with him. He and I just like neck and neck would race every time we rode. So it was a really fun competition. In fact, the last phone call I had with my dad, what did we talk about? Denmark and mountain biking. And he's like, Trav,
favorites.
yeah, he totally was telling me about his records up this specific trail. It's called Chumash, and we had a lot of great fun on that trail. But I found out one night as I was coming home from work that my dad had a heart attack. Yeah. And when your father's in such good physical shape, I just thought, yeah, right, whatever. This is a joke.
Yeah.
And he's fine. Okay, so maybe he had something wrong, and he's probably getting some.
He had to go to the hospital.
And get a checkup, whatever. I didn't know at the time he was already dead.
Wow.
By the time we got the message and the whole family found out, he had already been flown to the hospital, and I was waiting on the line, kind of waiting for my family to tell me what's going on. I'm in Utah, and they're down in Southern California, and so I get the message that he's gone.
Yeah.
And that floored me.
I'm sure.
That was a moment of, I just talked to him the other day.
Yeah.
I'm so close to my dad. I had this really great, relationship. I never thought in a million years that I would experience anything like this.
You'd go through your adult life without a dad, for
dad.
the most part, yeah.
Yeah. So, and my youngest brother, he was, I think, 16 at the time. And so we put a lot of energy into making sure he knew he was supported and helped. And my mom, who was beside herself, my mom and my dad had their challenges, but they had a good marriage.
Yes.
They had a strong marriage and a good family. And we're all weirdos. We're all, any of my family.
All of us are, right?
We're all weird in some way. But
yeah.
I just felt like my parents were, kind of had some things figured out, and they were just getting to the point where, my dad was starting to do some things professionally. He was 49, 2 weeks from his 50th birthday.
Not even 50, wow.
Not even 50. So when I tell people, my dad died of a heart attack, they probably think of this old man on a couch, just like eating potato chips, no, he was on a bike ride, and I struggled, Mark. I struggled to figure out, why did this happen?
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much, why God, why did you take him from me? I dealt with that. But then it was like, how did this happen?
Right.
How in the world?
How could that happen? Right.
Exactly. So
then it had an impact on you, though, in your personal and professional life. How would you say? What did that do to you? Because I know when those things happen to all of us, we reflect and we come out of those experiences often, and we kind of feel like, okay, I need to slow down. I need to focus on something different. Or how did it affect you, Travis?
Well, I love this platform because I can share some spiritual things.
Yeah.
I've been on a lot of podcasts where I kind of get into it.
Yeah.
But here, you
could just be as open.
I can be as open as natural as humanly possible.
You bet.
So I will tell you this, that I actually have to come back and circle on this loop. I did get called to serve my mission in Denmark.
I was gonna say, did you get?
Yes,
I was afraid
leave everybody like, did you? What happened? I got called to Denmark, and I will tell you, that was one of the most spiritual things. Opening my call.
Yeah.
And just my dad knowing that he knew how hard that mission was for him. He taught a lot of his family, and so I thought I was going there to teach some of his family too.
Right.
And I had a lot of spiritual experiences with that I won't, share too much, other than just we had just this great connection. And I would come home and I'd speak Danish to my dad and a lot of these things. But I really struggled because I thought my dad had a lot more to do in life.
Yeah.
That was my big thing, Mark. Yes, I'll miss him.
Sure.
I will. But he'll never really see his grandkids grow up in life.
Yeah.
So that was really hard.
Yeah.
Because we were a really tight family. But as I was contemplating, when you hear news that you don't expect, you go through shock.
Yeah.
And I was going through shock. And then I started to realize, oh my goodness, my brother's at the MTC right now. Who's
Wow.
going to tell him?
Yeah.
I'm living on 900 East with my wife and kids, and I just found out the news, and then I started stressing about that. I'm like, I don't want him just to find out.
Right.
I don't want somebody just like
Some random person.
hey, did you know? I'm like, what do I have? I have to go to the MTC.
Yeah.
I couldn't drive. My wife asked the neighbors to stay with the kids and drove me to the MTC. So here I am. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to tell my brother. I've never, the MTC was.
We've never done this before.
I've never done
right?
this before. Yeah. So I go to the front and I just sat down in one of the seats, and my wife was trying to explain the situation, and the I think it was an assistant to the mission president of the MTC came and said hi, and I could tell he was worried, probably more for the missionary.
Yeah.
Than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of getting annoyed.
Yeah.
And frustrated. I'm like, well, hold on. I had this idea. I was going to come and tell him he's going to come home for the funeral, and then he can come back to the MTC.
Yeah.
And everything I was telling to this brother, he was like, well, we need to be really careful. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, we want to keep him here. I'm like, oh, his number one goal is to keep missionaries.
Okay. Yeah.
In the MTC.
Sure.
I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. So there was some stress and pressure there. Anyway, long story, my brother came in and we just cried. I couldn't talk for minutes. And he's like, okay, something's really bad that's happening. You need to tell me now.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So I just told him, your daddy died today.
Yeah.
I hope this is appropriate. Sorry, Jaron, if this is not appropriate, but I think he had a premonition.
Yeah.
That something was going to happen to Dad. And I gave him a blessing. He needed to give me a blessing. I was a mess.
Right.
But I gave him a blessing, and he decided. He's like, no one even asked him.
Yeah.
He just said, I'm staying.
Yeah.
And I was floored.
Right.
I'm like,
oh yeah.
Okay. I just figured you'd come for the funeral, then you'd come back. But
yeah,
if that's how you want to do it.
Yeah.
What faith? But I think he was prepared. For some reason, he felt a premonition that he wouldn't see his dad again.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So,
does this affect you as a father today, as a husband, in your work? In what way would you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because when I sat there at the MTC, I know this may sound trite. And for members of the church, we don't ask for callings.
Yeah.
You don't ask for your calling as stake president. I didn't ask to be called as, young men's president, bishop, whatever. It doesn't matter. We don't ask. But we say, Lord, we're willing.
Yeah.
And then we get called. And I just had this overwhelming thought that my dad was going to be a general authority someday.
Yeah.
He had served in every bishopric that I can remember as a kid. Always as a counselor, always faithful, knew so much about the gospel. If anybody needed someone to volunteer, teach early morning seminary, they called my dad.
Yeah.
If anybody needed a blessing, it was my dad who they called. I knew his spiritual gifts.
Yeah.
And so I just figured, as a kid, that's what's just going to happen.
Yeah, that's what you do with guys like that, right?
Yeah, this is where they end up. So I kind of had a moment of pity where I looked up at the MTC. Everybody knows, at the opening area there, I looked up and I saw all the apostles' pictures. And that's what I couldn't figure out. I'm like, Lord, I don't understand. There was so much more for my dad to do.
Yeah.
So I'll share this experience and then I'll answer your question. In California, after the funeral, I helped my mom and I've never done this before, but I helped her to plan the funeral, buy the casket, buy a spot where her and my dad would be buried, burial plot, paid off her house, got her all financially set. I was a financial advisor at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of I just pulled everything together and started organizing and got Mom in a safe place. Well, 2 weeks later, she's like, you know what? Hey, I know you're leaving. You're going to go back home. You got to go back to your work, but I'd like to read Dad's patriarchal blessing. And I was like, well, there's an idea.
Yeah.
Because I had to write his obituary. And have you ever written an obituary?
No.
It's horrible.
Yeah. Although I've thought that it'd be fun for me to write my own. Wouldn't you like to write your own? That'd be super cool.
You're getting ahead of you must have read my book. And I know of people that have said, hey, you should do that. That's a good practice.
Yeah.
So I wrote my dad's obituary, and I had this experience where I'm like, my goodness, my dad's such a good guy. I am nowhere near where I should be. And that was an experience that I had with the Lord writing this out, going, what do I need to change?
Yeah.
What do I need to do different? And, oh, man, Mark, I can't tell you the things that I just sat down and started to write. But the next part, my mom asked my uncle to read the patriarchal blessing. I thought, okay, now I can finally prove that he wasn't supposed to leave.
Right. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah,
right?
and I'm still in shock. Like, this is 2 weeks later. I still am suffering from a lot of these issues. And as I was listening to my uncle read the blessing, I thought, okay, good. Now I can check, and see.
Yeah.
So he started reading, and I was like, okay, he did that. Okay, he accomplished that. And, when we know this about patriarchal blessings, not everything in a blessing is meant to be for here and now.
Right.
So I kept that in mind. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But everything.
But check, and check.
Yes, but check. And then the second page, check. Done.
Wow.
And I was now, my jaw's on the floor, and I was in tears just going, he did it.
Wow. Yeah.
He accomplished what he was supposed to do on earth.
Incredible.
And that, my friend, kind of completed me to think maybe I should write my own obituary.
Yeah.
Maybe I should start making some changes.
Yeah.
And that's actually an exercise that I ask people to do at the very beginning of my book, Achieving Balance. Because I think a lot of people, especially men, we are addicted to work. We're addicted to who is it that we are to the world.
Yes.
What do we do as an identity?
Uh-huh.
And because of that, we can work too much. That causes stress on the family, causes financial issues. Anyway, a long story there is that, if we can really understand who we are spiritually,
right,
then we can make time, hence the name of the company, make time for the things that are most important in life.
Yeah.
And keep a better sense of balance.
Right. Travis, that's so great. So I think that one of the things I'm learning as we talk is that experience did definitely shape who you are today in so many ways. And I think that's wonderful. That's what you have to take, I think, from those hardcore experiences in life, right? Of, okay, where do we go from here? What can we learn? What can we take with us? What can we... I remember as a bishop being in the home of a family who just lost a young child who had just passed away. And
can't imagine.
And they were really, obviously they knew he was going to die. He had cancer, but you still can't prepare, for that. But I remember telling them that he's going to be with you for your whole life. He is going to be close by. He's going to be with you, and he's going to have an influence on you for the rest of your life. And I know that he has. So great stuff. Okay, so gigantic transition. You ready for this?
Yes.
We almost need like a sound effect as we go from that kind of serious. But that's great, Travis. Thanks for being willing to share that. And I know there's someone out there that is going to listen to this and needed to hear what you just said. So thank you so much. All right, we're going to talk about finances. You've done so much work in this area, Travis, both in school but also in your professional life. And a lot of us, there's so many myths out there, right? There's so many myths about marriage, and we have statistics that are the divorce rate is half of all marriages end in divorce. Not even true, right?
Not true.
And I'm sure some of the data on money is not true either. So, is money really the number one cause of divorce?
No.
Bingo.
It's so many people, and I was a financial advisor, as I mentioned earlier, and I think we just got fed that so often.
Right.
We are here to help people with money, and so not only we're doing a good thing, but we're also helping the family, and I felt good about that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, as I went back to work, I'm gonna segue with my dad's story. As I went back to work, I started seeing my clients in a whole different light.
Sure.
I'm like, I'm helping them with life insurance and retirement. And I'm like, you don't know how long you're actually gonna live.
Right.
I'm like, hold on to each other. Like, this could be it. And man, it was a different paradigm.
Yeah.
And I started looking into health and stress.
Right.
And I noticed that a lot of my clients, they struggled with money.
Yeah.
They couldn't talk about money without feeling anxious, feeling worried. We talk about life insurance like it should be like, hey, this is a statistical thing.
Right.
You might make it to 85. You might die tomorrow by a Big Mac truck.
Yeah.
Let's just insure your life and figure this
Yeah.
gap out. And
Let's be prepared.
Let's just be ready. Come on. It's just common sense. But, oh, wow, that was so hard to talk about death with the spouse. And, oh, that's not even, college education and retirement. Like, don't get me started.
We don't want to go there,
Oh,
do we?
my goodness. So it was interesting because I saw a lot of these couples who really struggled with money. And the other thought that started to occur to me is like, my mom and dad didn't really argue about a whole lot of things.
Yeah.
They agreed on the gospel. They agreed on a lot of like how to parent us. And the thing that they struggled with a lot was money.
Yeah.
They argued about that and not like openly. A lot of times they would go and discuss it, which was a good habit they got into. But I know it was a stressor.
Thank you. I was going to say, because my research tells us that money is not the number one cause of divorce, but economic stress is a stressor, right?
It's a stressor.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I looked at that experience and I started to really dissect that.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll go to a psychology degree and I'll study stress.
Yeah.
That's what I did. So I got my own stress test. I went to the doctor 2 weeks later. I'm like, give me everything. He's like, well, we'll do a stress test. We'll do EKG. We'll do. I did a ultrasound of my arteries to see if stress buildup had begun in my body.
Yeah.
Because we found that the reason that my dad died was because one of his arteries was 90% clogged.
Yeah.
And the other three were,
totally
normal,
fine.
totally fine, which they call the widowmaker.
Yeah, that's it.
And
that's the one you don't want to have.
That's
clogged.
exactly. And so that's kind of maybe loops back to this. Well, how did your dad then die? Yeah. It was because of stress.
Yeah.
So I have a battle with stress. Stress and I'm stress's worst enemy. And I'm not just to say kumbaya and meditate all the time. I think there's some place to that. But what is the number one stressor that couples deal with and people deal with? It's still financial stress.
Yeah.
Very much so. So I did a lot of work in there, in psychology and try to figure this out. But if we loop back to this question, well, the problem is with couples, you and I know this because, we've done some research, but people out there listening, they don't understand a lot of times how research is done. You can't take a group and say, hey, you're the divorced group.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you guys, you're the non-divorced group. And we're going to figure out what caused that. You can't do that. But what you can look at in the research is predictors.
Yeah.
And financial arguments is a top predictor. But so is mental health issues.
Right.
And so are, infidelity and a lot of other issues that pile up. But I will tell you that the research does show that money is the number one argument.
Yeah.
It's the longest lasting of all the arguments.
Right.
And that argument is the most emotional, and it typically will trigger other arguments that couples argue about.
Right.
So if you can handle money, and if you can deal with money stress in your marriage, it affects everything else.
Right. And in a good way too, right?
Yes.
There's research that tells us that when couples are sound financially, when things are working out financially, that it actually insulates and protects them from divorce, right?
There's some great research out there, and that's how I got to Utah State. Is I started looking around like, hey, who's doing all this research? It's Jeff Dew.
It's Jeff Dew
at Utah State.
That's right.
So I was privileged to do my dissertation work with Jeff.
Wow. Okay. So
and I went to Utah State and said, hey, I'm here because I want to work with you.
Right.
And he's such a humble guy.
Yeah.
I know he's at BYU now. He's teaching in the family department down there. But I really enjoyed my time working with him. And my second book, Marry and Grow Rich, is all about the research that I did on money-related stress.
Yeah.
Achieving balance was really about the financial or the physiological, physical stress relators and how that's kind of related to money.
Yeah.
So the second book is like, okay, so then what do you do about it? How do you talk about it? How do you deal with it? And we get into this research. So I wanted to know, what was it that made it work? What was the I guess would say the strengths-based approach, and that's what we researched.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's transition to that for a minute. Is maybe one of the most important elements in couples being on the same page financially. If that, and I always think this way, that really the way that we spend money and view money is kind of an extension of our personality, but also the experiences that we had growing up. I tell our students that I grew up in a home where we had money, but our dad was super financially conservative, so we never knew that we had money. And so in my adult life, it's like, hey, we have money, let's go do something fun. My wife grew up with a dad who was in commercial real estate.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like up and down all the time. Sometimes they had a lot of money and sometimes didn't have any. So whenever we have money, she's like, let's hold on to that, right?
Yes.
So our experience has defined that.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. In my book, Marry and Grow Rich, which is, by the way, written for business owners, but the principles, any couple can apply these principles. But the idea that you actually, I know you're a therapist, you're a counselor, you go back to my mom and my dad, like a lot of people don't realize.
Right.
They gain most of their financial identity from their parents.
Wow. Okay.
Most.
I agree. Yeah.
So the research does show us that something called money scripts. Now, a money script is kind of like your psychological relationship with money.
Yeah.
And that kind of scripts you.
Your template, yeah.
Yeah, your template is like, hey, this is how I act.
Uh-huh.
I don't spend money a lot. I'm thrifty. or man, if I get money, it's gone, Money therapy, that's,
Yeah, that's right.
And we peg genders, to be men more fiscally conservative, women to be more not necessarily true all the time.
Yeah.
But there are some issues here with gender differences, which I won't get into just yet. But what I want to focus on is individually, psychologically.
Yeah.
We have a relationship with this inanimate object called money. Now, money isn't necessarily what we think it is. If I'm saying money right now, a lot of people are like, yeah, I've got money in my pocket. No, you don't. If you're carrying bills or change, that's currency.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That's not money. We call it money because that's what we've come to call it. That's what society does, is we change our languages, right? But currency is how we utilize it. I mean, I've got an iPhone here on the desk. I can use digital currency to interact and exchange value. Money is the value that we place on currency. Just understanding what money is helps us be like, oh, okay, because if we go back and be like, hey, when did money actually show up? Well, we first see it like with shells, beads, and then eventually coins minted with, Caesar's head on it,
right,
etc. Why? Well, because if you were a shoemaker and I'm a bread maker, and a guy over here down the street, he does cheese, right? And I need some cheese, and we start trading amongst each other. Well, it gets hard if you have bought a bunch of cheese and I need that from you, and you don't agree on the amounts. It just gets confusing,
right?
Because now we're trading and bartering, and the bartering system has worked for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. But once currency was invented, now we could say, well, this bead is 10 loaves of bread.
Yeah. Right?
And now I can exchange this without having to go to a third party to get what I need. I can go straight to the person I need it from. So if we can see money as not evil, as not necessarily good, but as a tool, it can change our psychological relationship with money. In addition, like you said, so then if we understand, what were our parents like with money?
Yeah. What
about our grandparents? Or some of our grandparents and great-grandparents, depression, babies, right? And then we had a boom, and then, we've been in ups and downs since then. And you even mentioned, like, based on different careers, like how people interact with money. Well, that's really important because that's been, since your childhood, the most influential person with money. You'll hear people like, well, money doesn't grow on trees. I heard that a lot growing up.
Yeah.
And, or don't spend it all in one place. Or what do you think I am, made of money? Right? I mean, those tend to be some of the negative interactions with money.
Yeah.
But other parents may have taught their children how to, save it and be thrifty with it. Or, by example, when I'm in a bad mood or I need to pick me up, I'm going to go spend it.
Right.
So all of those things, if you think about your own parents and grandparents, what has been their relationship with money? So that is what I call your money history.
Yeah.
You can actually diagram it out and kind of see where it's from. I had a client who's really struggling with money. Her husband, business owner, would get large amounts of money.
Yeah.
And he couldn't figure out why. As soon as he brought it home, it was gone.
Yeah.
And it was causing huge problems in the relationship.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I kind of diagrammed this out and said, okay, tell me about your parents. Tell me about your grandparents. And she found out, oh, my mom, she hates money. I'm like, okay, now we're on to somewhere.
Getting somewhere, yeah.
I'm like, what about her parents? Well, it was her dad who said, money is evil. I'm like, ooh, let's talk about it. And we can talk about this. So let's look at the scriptures. What did the scriptures say? Well, if we go to 1 Timothy, what? Money is the
love of money is the root of all evil.
Yeah, so
right?
people take the love out. Oh, money is the root of all evil.
Right.
No, you have to put it in context.
Yeah.
The love of money
is
the root of all evil because it leads to pride.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads to turning ourselves away from God.
Yeah.
That's what he was saying.
Yeah.
And, well, what about all these other scriptures? I've spent years, Mark, studying what I call money scriptures.
Okay.
So we have money scripts. That's the psychological aspect. But
money scriptures too,
money
right?
Scriptures. And I've studied prosperity, debt, money from a spiritual and physical aspect. And it's incredible because we as Latter-day Saints have to be really careful. I had a BYU professor who would a lot of times, I could just feel it, like in how he interacted. He was a religion professor, but he would often say, all those people that live up on the benches.
Yeah. Those big houses.
Those big houses, they must have stolen, And I'm like, those are the psychological things that if we're not careful, can really harm us.
Right.
Because if that's how we think about money, then that's how it will act in our life.
Mm.
So I always tell people, especially members of the church, study money scriptures. Look what the Lord has said about money. And if I can I talk about the rich young ruler for a second?
Yeah, that's great.
So my best example, I love this example.
I love this story. It's a great
I do
one.
too. And we can kind of set it up. The story of the rich young ruler, studied the New Testament at all. He comes to the Lord, and he's like, Lord, I followed all the commandments. I've done this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
What else do I need to do?
Yeah. What lack I yet?
What lack I yet? And there's a spiritual component. I think there's a physical component. But we know that his disciples are all kind of huddled around, like listening to his teaching. Like, what's he going to say?
Yeah.
And they knew he was a rich guy. And I think, he picked poor people, except for maybe Matthew and a couple of others. Like, they're fishermen. They were tradesmen. They weren't rich. But this guy truly was.
Yeah.
And I think the Lord looked into this young man's heart. And we have some conference talks about this. And like, hey, this is what you personally, individually need to do. Not the entire world.
Yeah.
He said, go and sell all and come follow me. He was inviting him.
Right.
Number one, we don't know what happened to the rich young ruler. We never hear of him again.
Never hear of him again. That's right.
I have a hope that he joined up. But we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what he did. But his disciples kind of turned to the Lord and like, Lord, this guy,
right.
What's his deal? Is he going to, can he come into heaven? And this is where, and I paraphrase, I don't have the scriptures right in front of me right now, but I paraphrase, but the Lord said, it's more difficult to go through the eye of a needle.
Yeah.
Now I grew up, Mark, hearing from my seminary teachers and from my Sunday school teachers that money was bad because of this
you're rich,
story.
You can't get through the eye of the needle.
That's it. And I heard that, you actually have to go. There's this little gate in Jerusalem wall. You have to take everything off the camel and you have to push the camel through. But we have the Institute Manual. You can go to the Institute Manual, look up the story, and it says there is nowhere in recorded history that this gate ever existed.
Yeah.
This is a made-up story.
Yeah.
But instead, the Lord is using... What is it?
A parable?
A
metaphor.
Metaphor. Thank you. A metaphor to teach. Because the Joseph Smith translation says, it's impossible to get to heaven without me being the Savior.
A little different translation, right?
That changed everything when I learned that. I'm like, he's not saying you can't get into heaven if you're rich. Of course it's going to be hard if you don't turn yourself to him. And that's what he was trying to say with this rich young ruler. And I think a lot of people think, well, he didn't repent because he told his disciples that he can't come to heaven. That's not true.
Yeah.
We just don't know. But what we do know is the Lord said, I am the way.
Yeah.
You can't buy your way into heaven.
Right.
But just because you have it doesn't make you a bad person.
Right.
And that's the part I think a lot of Christians get wrong.
Yeah.
But we have the inspired translation.
It's great translation, isn't it?
I love it. It really changed everything about it. And that's just one example. But there are literally dozens and dozens. We can talk about the endowment. What's the endowment? Endowment's a gift that keeps on giving. It's eternal.
Yeah.
Well, in the financial world, if you give an endowment to a university, right?
Yeah.
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
The Lord paid the price of all of our sins. He paid our debts. What did people do back in the day? Well, they had to get rid of their debt. They had to pay it off. They had to work, sometimes their entire life. The Lord takes all of this and gives us an eternal reward in heaven. Like, I think if we turn our eyes and say, well, what are the scriptures telling us about, and how does this spiritually help us? I think the money scriptures can do more for us than even the psychologists.
Right.
These money scripts. That's important, but I think because we can talk about the fullness of the gospel here on this podcast, there's no question. That has helped me, and quite honestly, a lot of my clients more than anything else.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Love that, Travis. So, Travis, I think this is great foundational and really theological, kind of underpinnings of Christ and his teachings about money and wealth. So going back to marriage just for a second. So you have a couple who, like you've given some of those examples, right? The guy comes home with the wad of money, and 2 days later, it's all gone. And his wife's like, oops. What do you do with these couples who aren't on the same page financially? Yeah. I'd love to get your kind of practical counsel on some of this.
Yeah, well, I'll finish that story with this answer.
Yeah.
That, it turns out because she had such a bad relationship with money, so negative.
Right.
The reason why it flew out of the bank account is psychologically she was getting rid of it.
Wow.
Yeah. She was like, hey, I need this gone.
I got to get rid of it. Yeah,
This makes me a bad person. I can't have this. And isn't it bizarre? Like, you don't think this. Well, that's why we study psychology, is we look at, how does this work with,
how does this affecting their psyche? Yeah.
Exactly. So then, as we look at couples, and back to Jeff Dew, he and I did some research with couples. There were several thousand couples in the United States that we already had data on. I wish I could have pulled them and everything, but it's a dissertation. You got to get it done. Yeah. So we got the data, and we started looking through, and I really wanted to kind of figure out what's at the core of this. How do couples work from a strengths-based perspective? We know why they argue. We know what they argue about and why it leads to all these problems. So what do good couples do then?
Right.
What do the strong ones do? So that's what we looked at.
Yeah.
We looked at couples with great marriages, and we found in the literature that couples that had the same values and goals, so what we're calling shared values.
Yeah.
If they have the same values and goals, well, then they'll be on the same team parenting-wise, relationally wise, religious, money, and we looked at all of these factors together.
Right.
We found that there's a group of couples that had shared values, and the ones that didn't, they did not relate to marital satisfaction and financial stability and even psychological well-being. But the ones that did scored yes on all of those, which means essentially if you're on the same team,
right,
then you get all these benefits. It's not only money, but it's in your relationship, your parenting, and your own psychological health. So what do you do to do that? Well, first thing I tell couples is sit down and figure out, where are you individually with money? What do you think about it? And then share it with your spouse and have your spouse do the same for you. I bet you could probably sit down. Oh, I know my wife. She's like this, Yeah. But let her have that experience, and wives, let your husbands have that experience, and then have a talk.
Yeah.
Discuss, why? Well, my mom was like this, my grandma. And look at your money history. Where is this coming from? You will better understand your spouse financially.
Yes.
And then you begin to create, what I call financial intimacy. because now you can share. And now you can say, well, these are my values financially. Here are your values financially. Let's take the overlap, the Venn diagram overlap, and say, well, here's where we are together. And it's okay that we have these differences.
Yeah, we're not going to be the same
No.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So where can we work on? Work on the strength.
Yeah, let's get aligned on some of these
Yes.
things and
Yeah.
leverage that a little bit.
Yeah. And if you both believe that you should have some money saved up and you both believe that, you should be frugal, then focus on those things.
Yeah.
Now, the problem in lies that if you have two who just, know how to spend like there is no tomorrow, you can be in trouble.
Or sunk.
You're sunk.
Right.
So that's when you need someone like me to come in and help you. Like, okay, this is where you really should be financially. So I believe that money is a stewardship. And when you look at the money scriptures, it's clear.
Yeah.
The Lord gives us gifts. He gives us opportunities. He gives us stewardships.
Yeah. And I think, for couples to be proactive, right, in this area, to identify maybe where the weak spots are, but to have some goals, have some dreams, work on this together in a proactive way. We're going to have a meeting once a week where we're going to kind of talk about these things, what's coming up, how do we plan, what are we saving?
Yeah.
Because we have couples we've seen couples like that. He or she is one partner's trying to save, and the other is just like spending like there's no tomorrow, and their wheels are just spinning.
It's a disaster because that's actually high conflict right there.
Yeah.
And I outline in my book, Marry and Grow Rich, where depending on the type of relationship you have with money, it kind of predict high conflict marriage or a low conflict marriage, or you guys just get along just great because you complement each other.
Right. So
be cognizant of that. But I love what you mentioned. I came up with something called having money time.
Yeah.
After family night on Monday nights, whatever night you do it on, doesn't matter. But after you have your family night and the kids are in bed, sit down and talk about money once a week.
Yeah.
Just once a week.
Right.
That's it.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes. And I don't really care what system you use. I call it 10-10-80. 10 to saving, or 10 to tithing, 10 to savings, and 80% live on the rest.
Right.
If you can do that, you can reach any financial goal, regardless of income.
Yeah.
Because you'll stick to a plan.
Right.
And then when you go into a financial planner, because you have money saved up, they can help you allocate where it needs to go.
Right.
So, what can you do? Well, look at the income. No matter if it's coming from business or, W-2s, it doesn't matter. Look at that pooled income and decide what's 10% of that. Pay your tithing as a bishop. Oh my goodness, blessings come from paying tithing, and not always financially.
I agree.
Right?
I think most of ours were not financial blessings, but they were incredible miracles.
Miracles happen when you pay your tithing. Plus, you have access to so many blessings of the temple and everything. That in itself is a miracle.
Yeah.
But the other 10%, if you can just get in the habit of paying yourself first, of saving something,
right,
then that will grow. And, have responsible people that can help you as financial advisors. And then the other 80%, all you do is you prioritize all of those needs and you prioritize all the wants. And when the 80% is up, then you draw a line. And say,
we're done.
We're done.
We can't spend any more this month. It's the 15th, but we're walking.
It's like the Saturday Night Live thing. Like, what do we do? Don't buy on credit. Like, pay cash. Like, there's
Don't buy things you can't afford.
Don't buy things you can't afford. That's exactly. Thank you. But man, if you can do those things and just have a talk with your spouse every week, I understand some couples don't know where to start.
Yeah.
How do I start with this? Start with yourself.
Yeah.
Start exploring what's my financial relationship.
And I Travis, and if I can have a do-over, because I think there's so much to be said here about discipline. Really, I think that's the root of. But I remember thinking when I was younger that if we saved anything, it probably would be $10. That's probably not worth it. One day when we have more money, we can start saving, but that would have been a great habit to get in as a young married couple right off the bat, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody's in different situations. I'm talking to people that could be working in any occupation. I work mainly with business owners, and business owners see that their largest asset is their business.
Yeah.
So a lot of money gets reinvested there.
Right.
But even then, you should still have savings on the side for those ups and downs, those rides. Like, if I know anything of business owners, is that the income oftentimes is up and down. But I will say this: the Lord wants us to be rich. Now, anyone that has more than one pair of shoes is rich.
Yeah.
By the definition of the world standards. I remember learning this in my sociology experience at BYU going,
if you have shoes,
my goodness, you have more than one pair of shoes, you're rich. So we don't know how actual wealthy we are in the United States. We are so wealthy. We are so prosperous. That could be a whole other talk.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this. The problem is that when we get to this top of what I call the prosperity cycle, I don't look at the pride cycle.
Yeah.
I think pride cycle is looking at it too negative. Like, we're going to go there. You don't have to go there. Kim B. Clark said that what you got to do to not get down into the pride cycle is get to the part where you're blessed and then you're grateful. And then you can skip across the circle and you can be blessed again.
Yeah. You don't have to go through all the hell
You
you mean?
don't have to do that. No.
Wow.
And, so if you can do one other thing, just be grateful. Sit back and you don't have to be grateful for things, but be grateful for the gospel. Be grateful for your family. Be grateful for something. Gratitude, oh, wow. It is the mother of all other virtue. It is where we should start. It is where we start with our prayers. It's where we should start, honestly, with money.
Yeah.
It's just being grateful for the situations that we have in life and quit, trying to be the Joneses, trying to keep up with everybody, trying to be on social media and act like all the other, families out there. But to just be grateful for what the Lord has, and I know He'll bless us.
Oh, Travis, that's great. Travis, we always like to end with this idea of LDS. Let's do something. So we're going to invite our listeners today to do something. What do you got for them?
Okay, I'm going to go back to originally money time.
Yeah.
Now, when my wife and I first got married, we sat down on Monday, and I had this green ledger, and I said, honey, we're going to do a budget. She's like, no, we're not. I'm like, yes, this will save us.
Yeah.
And at first she was kicking and screaming. Now she's the one that pulls me down. Like, we need to talk about money. And I can tell you, if you can make this a habit, just half an hour, go over, are you paying your tithing? Make sure that you know that. I've had conversations where, oh, I thought my wife was paying. I thought my husband was paying. Oh, my goodness. You guys are in a tight situation here. Are you saving? What are you doing with that? But then where is that money being spent? Where are you stewarding that money?
Yeah.
Because the Lord has given that to you as a blessing.
Yeah.
He expects you to, as a stewardship, something we've been blessed with, take care of, to utilize that. So half an hour, max hour. There's no arguing. There's no yelling. There's no telling each other. You're on the same team.
Especially when it's proactive, right?
Yes.
This is not in the heat of the moment where someone just spent $500 on something and we only had $30 in the bank and
it bounced.
This is a proactive Sabbath day. We're going to be cool. And I always tell people when you have meetings like this, it's just got to be positive and probably brief, right? Because no one wants to sit around on a Sunday night for 3 hours getting clubbed over the head for buying a, whatever.
No, and what this does is this opens to talk about anything else. Like, what are we doing for the week? How are we on our relationship goals?
It's a great couples meeting, right?
It is.
In general.
Exactly. But if you can do this one, you can do anything.
Right.
So you can talk about parenting. You can talk about sexual intimacy. You can talk about in-laws. You can talk about,
vacations.
Just like if you can tackle the hardest thing first, which is money.
Yeah.
Back to our original, this is where the stressor is. And you can support each other. You really are unstoppable.
Yeah. Travis, that's so good. Well, Travis, thank you so much for being here today, being with us, making the long drive down from Cache Valley. And look forward to, we got to do this again. This was great.
100%. I loved it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Everyone out there, have a great week. We'll see you next time.